Welcome, everybody. So glad that you are able to be here for our death salon this May. I will let you know first that this is being recorded and going to be posted on YouTube when we're done with this. So if you would like to turn off your video or anything, just have that, bear that in mind that you are being recorded. I'd asked folks to check in the chat. Where are you from? And just sort of, if you want to say a word saying how you're doing, that's great too. But I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon this morning, and I'm happy to be here and looking forward to talking with all of you.
I am here from Colorado, way up in the mountains. We had a bunch of snow last night, but the sun is rising and it is slowly melting and turning into a beautiful day.
Awesome. Maplewood, New Jersey. What? I used to live in Glen Ridge. How's New Jersey, Lauren?
Hey, Shelly from Buffalo.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you for joining us, and no worries about multitasking. We know how that goes. We're just grateful you joined us.
Awesome. Yes, thank you all so much for being here. This is going to be it's going to be a good salon. It is going to be a little bit different from previous salons because we're going to be encouraging more active discussion between everybody here today. And you don't have to speak, obviously, to participate. You can throw questions in the chat or comments. Keep the camera off. If you want to speak aloud, that's great too, but you certainly don't have to. Andrea, do you want to?
I do. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge the atrocity that occurred yesterday in Texas, in Uvalde. We ourselves don't have the words to express the deep pain and sadness this country is experiencing. However, this is a safe space to discuss the grief and the loss aspects of this if anyone would like to during the Q&A, although we will not engage in political discussion today. But we just really wanted to take a moment to acknowledge I don't even have the words, but our hearts go out to all of the families and the victims and to this country that is in deep need of healing.
Thank you. Thank you. On that note, I'd like to take us through a breathing exercise to help us get grounded and centered. It is super simple, breathing in and out and just paying attention to it, but it's still super effective. I'm just going to guide you for a relatively normal in breath and then a nice long out breath. And we'll just do a few of those. So get comfortable. And when you're ready, take a nice breath in. And when you get to the top, hold it for a second. And then as slow as you can, just let it out. Just allow it to release. Don't force it. Maybe a little push at the end to get that last little bit out. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. One more time, breathe in. And grab another gulp in. And out. Wow. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. The primary topic that we're going to be discussing is grief surrounding loss of parents, mothers specifically. And Andrea's gonna start. So Andrea.
So as Daniel said, this salon is different because we're not only sharing from our doula perspective, but from our very personal human selves as well. I'm going to share something with you that I wrote on March 4th, 2022. I woke up today with an ache behind my eyes and in my chest. My body knew before my brain did. It took me a few seconds to register the source. Today is always a hard day. It has been 7 years since I had to make the choice to remove my mother from life support, and 7 years since she left this realm. 7 years seems so long and so short all at once. I miss her every day. I miss her in ways that I never could have imagined. My mother and I had a very complicated relationship. Today is bittersweet for so many reasons, and I find myself both smiling and tearing up intermittently. It's bittersweet in the way that my heart aches, and at the same time, the smile that graced my lips when I think of how charismatic and fabulous my mom was. She was amazing. It's bittersweet knowing all the lessons that I've learned and continue to learn after her death, and especially bittersweet in knowing the peace that came with forgiving my mother. And that's something that only happened after her death. I am grateful for how big my heart has grown and continues to grow. This is the gift in all of this. Amidst all the heartache and heartbreak, I have been blessed with an ever-growing capacity for love, for life, and for vulnerability. You see, today doesn't just mark the anniversary of my mother's death. It is also a hard reminder of the approaching Mother's Day and her birthday. It's also the anniversary of a time when my entire life burned down around me. In a lot of ways, it felt like I lost everything. I was reminded of how strong I am because of the softness of my heart, because of my willingness to let it break over and over again, and because of my refusal to let it close up and become hard and cold. My heart is my greatest strength. So today, while I let the tears fall and the smiles turn up, it's with a mixture of sadness, but also awe, gratitude, and even a little bit of joy. I am in awe of this exceptionally beautiful life. I am grateful to have found that the depths of my grief are directly linked to my immense capacity to know joy and to have a heart that is brave enough to know and hold it all. So yes, my heart aches so much, but oh, how it rises every time it falls with the same force of nature, echoing the waves in their ability to be both soft and powerful all at once. So I give thanks for a heart like the ocean, deep, vast, soft, and strong. So as I move through the day, I will let my heart ache, but I will also be open to receiving joy, however it may come. These complex feelings I hold can hurt so much and feel so challenging, but they also remind me just how alive I am. I miss you, Mommy, and I love you. I am so grateful for your gift of this precious life. I want to thank everyone for giving me the space to share that. It's something that's very personal, and even 7 years later, it still brings up a lot of emotion, and my grief journey continues, and I continue to move with it. So again, thank you for letting me be a human and share, and I hope you guys will do the same. Daniel?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share about my mother as well. I miss my mom. When my mom died, I didn't have the emotional bandwidth or the maturity to handle what was happening. I was 17. I chose to ignore what was happening instead. And it's only now 30 years later that I've grown sufficiently to be able to process it and move through her death. I mean, her death was probably the single most impactful event that would shape my life from that point on. I struggled to connect with the divine when I was a teenager. And I remember one of the scariest moments of my life was when I was listening, when I was holed up in my bedroom as my mother angrily railed against God about what was happening to her. She had breast cancer, and she died a few months after that. And 10 days after she died, I left for my first summer at West Point, cutting myself off from my family, the situation, and even grieving. Yeah, I was just conditioned to respond like this, which was, actually just not responding and refusing to talk about it. I became an atheistic materialist for many years after that. Like it's only I finally came back in from that wilderness just a few years ago, and it was only at that point that I was finally able to start grieving and processing what had happened to my mother and my response to her death. So my healing came from the grieving that I was able to begin in about 2018. And it's amazing that it took 26 years to even begin this process. And it's just like, this is a really good example of the timelessness of grieving and healing, and the fact that it is never too late to do this sort of work. And I can finally cry for my mom. I wasn't able to do that back in 1992. I mean, I barely cried at all for most of my life. And I find it amusing these days, as crying has become like my principal means of letting go and releasing that sort of energy. It just sort of happens. I embrace crying now. especially for my mom, because it does allow me to express my love and feel a connection that had been missing for so much of my adult life. So yeah, and now we want to open the floor to you to share about grief and loss. It doesn't have to be about mothers. So at this point, we can open up. You can put comments in the chat, raise your hand, and we can unmute you. However feels comfortable and right. And there's no wrong way to do this.
And
So,
if you would like to speak but not have your video on, that's fine. You just unmute yourself and start talking. Shelley, would you like to speak?
I would.
Thank you.
I spent over a year of my life with friends, taking care of a dear friend who was dying of cancer. And she kept me busy being her advocate. And so I never really grieved. And I know that sounds silly, but for a year, I had to make sure she had somebody in the home with her at all times. I had to make sure that when the hospital wanted to do another unnecessary test, that someone was there to say, why? What are you going to do it for? What's going to change? How is it going to alter her care? It was such a deep, devastating loss. And it's amazing to me that it's this year, she's been gone 3 years, but it's this year that I'm feeling it the most, realizing how much she meant to me and how much she gave to me and taught me. And it breaks my heart that I didn't grieve her properly. I even remember that, at her funeral, I was in a rage because we trusted one of her other good friends to arrange it. And she made it all about this woman's husband, who was very wealthy and had passed away. And he had a name in society that would serve her well. So instead of eulogizing Mary Ellen, the girlfriend, we heard all about what her husband accomplished. I literally walked out of the room where we were having the service. I couldn't bear it anymore. I just wanted to scream. And I don't know what possessed me to tell you today, except for this week, she's been there in my heart, showing up in ways that are very unusual, but typical Mary Ellen. In fact, that's why, because on her birthday, I got up and I didn't realize it was her birthday. Completely went right over my head. But for some reason that morning, I put on the earrings she gave me and I put on the ring she gave me. And I was halfway through my day before somebody sent a message saying, celebrating Mary Ellen with a glass of wine and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh my God. I mean, she wasn't going to let me forget. She's always there. I know she's always there. I know I did all the right things. I don't have any shame or regret. But it is my turn to grieve.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Shelley. A couple things. You're not grieving wrong, and there's nothing wrong with you or the way you're grieving. My father died 4 months after my mother. I still haven't fully grieved for my father. I haven't even been able to touch it yet. And it doesn't mean that I didn't love him. It doesn't mean anything. It just, grief takes its time. It has its own timeline.
I have someone at my door. I apologize because I appreciate what you're saying. One moment.
Sure thing. And just to say to everyone, it's a really important and often misunderstood aspect of grief. There is no timeline, even though there are stages of grief. Those aren't really real. Those not everybody goes through them. Not everybody goes through them at the same time or in the same path. So there's no wrong way to grieve. And we find that people can feel upset, like they feel like they're not honoring their loved one correctly because they haven't grieved in a way that is societally acknowledged, I guess. But there's a lot of ways to grieve and a lot of ways to honor people.
right, and being able to accept your grieving for what it is like that's really, I mean, that's a practice in and of itself. Is being, looking at how you're moving through that grief and being okay with it, however it looks like. It's perfect. That's the only way you can grieve. Like you're grieving exactly the way you're supposed to, and well done for that.
And also, I think it's amazing how she shows up, and I fully believe I talk to my mom all the time and I know she's around. So how amazing that you put your Mary Ellen's ring on and her earrings on that day. You just, that is a beautiful gift. And I think also I've had the experience of a memorial or a funeral being rather atrocious and needing to not be there. So you might have one for yourself. You might decide to eulogize her yourself, or have a little celebration with maybe just yourself or a couple other friends. If you'd like, have a glass of wine, say the things that you would have liked to have heard that day, because it's not too late to do that.
And that opportunity is actually coming, so it'll be perfect. We can do it then.
Good,
Yeah.
wonderful. And I encourage you to just talk to her out loud. I love it. I really find that it's a good and a healthy practice.
It is. Thank you.
Shelley. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would like to share anything? Hi, Terrence.
Hi guys. I'm not sure what time of day it is where you are, but it is 11 something in the morning here. So yeah. So I lost my oldest daughter. It'll be 6 years ago in October. She had also celebrated her birthday in October. So October 13th, she had a birthday, and then the 25th, she passed away. She passed away from an asthma attack. For the last 39 years, professionally, I have been a respiratory therapist. And I tell people that my kid made me the respiratory therapist that I am today, because that was why I became one. And what I find is that now she would have celebrated her 42nd birthday this year. And what I find and that's the one thing about triggers, you just never know. But because I still practice, I may have an asthmatic patient come in. I don't always send them home. Sometimes they pass away. So then I find myself, I have to stop. I have to stop right where I am, and I have to go to a place by myself. Because like I said, I never know when it's going to hit, but sometimes it's very significant. And about a week ago, which is just the strangest thing. Well, I mean, not strange, but someone I had gone to middle school and high school with, we carried our children at the same time, both girls, both named Ebony. Now, a week ago, Ebony was killed. So here I go. It's just like, boom, all over again. I mean, just with the name, the age, because they would be the same age this year. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out how I can, I don't know. I don't want to say survive, because I think that's about what I'm doing, surviving. And I feel like I'm at peace with my daughter's death. I do talk to her all the time. Sometimes sometimes I fuss, but yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out how I can still be there in a way for other mothers who have lost their children. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I will say that service, the act of service, is one of the most healing things that you can possibly do. So serving others in a capacity where you offer support or holding space, it's a wonderful idea. And I definitely encourage it. I'm so glad to hear that you talked to her. I think I really do think it's important. And I'm grateful that you shared about triggers and about how they can pop up anywhere when it comes to grief. like, I mean, like a gut punch that you weren't expecting. And that's really important to know. And it doesn't matter how many years it's been. I had a similar experience a couple of years ago in a grocery store where I saw the back of some woman's head and she looked like my mom, and I lost my shit. I had to drop my grocery basket and leave the grocery store. And when
Yeah.
I turned around, the woman was Asian and looked nothing like my mom. But it's amazing how that hits. So I like that you have a plan for yourself, that you know that you need to just pause.
Mhm.
A pause is one of the most powerful tools that we have. Can pause, take 3 breaths. To connect back into the breath is a really wonderful way to kind of ground and to be in the present moment, and to be okay with those feelings. There's nothing wrong with them, and there's nothing wrong with grief popping up 2 years later, 4 years later, 34 years later.
Yeah.
There is no timeline. And thank you for being brave and sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I love that you transmuted your pain into becoming your career and making that like that's well, that's losing my mother and then I actually lost my brother 5 years after that. That was sort of, they were definitely influential in me being here and doing this. And I think the same for Andrea too. I think that's a lovely response to pain, to be able to like take that and serve others to help them move through similar pain that you've already navigated and have kind of an idea of what's what that space is like already, and be able to share and make it safe for others to move through that. So thank you. That's fantastic.
You mentioned that you felt like you were just surviving, but I would like to reframe that a little bit and say that you are thriving. You're not just surviving, you are thriving. You have turned this pain, what you've done, turning your pain into service, is alchemy. And that is one of the most powerful tools in the universe. So I would just like to, from my perspective, of course, you are not just surviving, you are thriving. And I see it loud and clear and beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, alchemy. Love that word. Excellent. Hey.
But it is the meaning of alchemy is turning one thing into another. Often it was talked about with metals, but it's turning pain and grief into something action and into love. You are grief is love, and a lot of times really hard grief is love that has nowhere to go. So being in service, that provides an action for your grief.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you again for sharing. And anyone else. And again, if you don't want to speak, you can write it into the chat. And no pressure to share it all. But we are certainly grateful for everyone that has. And again, grateful for allowing Daniel and I the space to get to share in this manner, because it's not something we get to do that often. Well, if nobody else has anything else to share, if anyone has any questions, any other comments, please let us know. Otherwise, we will probably just start to wrap this up, give you a few details of our general goings on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess just the latest, we've got a variety of services, specifically like grief and death anxiety support is something that we are very, something that we are very proactive in, reaching out and help people with. There's a link for that on our website. We've got a couple other services that we like to help folks with as well. We've got most recently started supporting folks with dementia support. I'm having trouble.
And all of these links are in
in.
the chat, but they will also be in the follow-up email as well.
So there's our dementia, and also just for more general existential angst, for lack of a better word, or just general struggles in that area. We've got a sort of spiritual coaching if you want to just discuss the meaning of life, or whatever, something that's troubling you in general. We
And
are
in
here.
that we do a lot of mindfulness work.
Right, that is very,
A lot of,
absolutely.
it's mindfulness-based coaching, and that just helps you to be rooted in the present. Also want to mention that there are several ways to donate to the Virtual Death Doula Network. This is what enables us to serve clients that are not able to pay for the care that we offer. It also helps keep us running in general. So you can donate through PayPal, you can donate through Venmo. We actually have a fundraiser going on Instagram, so you can donate that way as well. All donations are definitely tax deductible, and you receive an email with a receipt. And we are always grateful. Every little bit counts. And again, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing, for being your beautiful, authentic selves. This is really what makes our work such a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. You all, thank you everybody for being here. This has been fantastic. Love you, love you, love you.
Yes, so much love. And we will send out a follow-up email in the next week or so that will have a video for YouTube of this, as well as the resources.